Greetings. Welcome to the Captive Desk. Today we're having roasted ham for lunch, and we're joined with friends. Please welcome Dan, Mike, Seth, and Scott to the Captive Desk. Dan Phelps, as many of you know, and for those of you who don't, is a thorn in Ken Ham's side. He's the one that, if you know any information about Ken Ham, it was probably because Dan got it from public information or wrote an editorial or a blog. And if you'd like to know more about that, I did an interview with Dan. Check it out. And we are joined with Mike, also known as Speed, from Answers in Atheism, which is a play on Answers in Genesis. And Mike's been a long time counter Ken Ham pseudoscience content creator. And we're also joined with his co-host, Scott Duke. And we have Seth with us. Seth was a former employee of Ken Ham. He had the luxury spot of the fourth deck on the Ark to work from. And we've had an interview with Seth before, and we've had an interview with Mike before. You can check those out. And cross between everybody, we had some different questions going back and forth and everything. So I thought, hey, we'll just get everybody all together in a stream, and we can just do our chit chats and ask our questions and everything. And all things Ken Ham. So, gentlemen, thank you all for joining me. Welcome. Welcome to everybody in the audience. Glad to see everybody joining us. And I wanted to start things out. Dan, you recently sent me an email talking about Ken Ham having issues with his peers in the religions, and he just doesn't seem to get along with not only the scientists, but he can't get along with his own peers. What's that going on with there, Ken Ham?
Well, there was an article by his son-in-law, Bodie Hodge, which was pretty rabid, even for Answers in Genesis type material. And I think I gave you a chart earlier showing the summary of the talk. And basically, Ken Ham, he has God's religion, which is biblical Christianity, and it's contrasted with not God's religion, which is related to humanism. And underneath the not God's religion, you have counterfeits of biblical Christianity that include the Roman Catholic Church, Islam, Judaism, the Jehovah's Witnesses, and Mormons, as well as the Seventh-day Adventists. And it's pretty interesting because a lot of flood geology and modern creationism was actually invented by the Seventh-day Adventists back in the 1920s. So this was put out by Ken Ham's son-in-law, but I guarantee you that it wouldn't have made the Answers in Genesis website if it hadn't been something that Ken Ham agreed with. So if you can put up that particular chart at some point.
Do we have a link to that too?
But anyway, it's rather fascinating.
Let me see.
Can you bring that up?
Yep, I'm looking right now. One second.
I don't have the ability to put things up on the screen.
That takes years and years of YouTube expertise.
I'm getting better. Just takes me a minute to click around here.
Yeah, if it was Zoom, I'd know how to do it, but I don't know how to do this.
Here we go. I did it.
There we go.
All right.
And this is from an article on Answers in Genesis website. And the article itself attacks Roman Catholics as worshiping the Virgin Mary. And having been raised Catholic, I thought that was hilarious because I didn't think anybody attacked the Catholics on that anymore. I'm no longer a Catholic, but at the same time, it's really, really funny to see something like that put on by a public group that's getting tax money from Kentucky tourism. they get a tax incentive from Kentucky Tourism to support the Ark. And what happens is that they don't have to pay they get a rebate back on their sales tax basically, up to $1.825 million a year. And I think it doesn't end until 2026. So they're getting Kentucky money that would ordinarily go into Kentucky's tax coffers that, that they're getting this spectacular bonus while at the same time attacking a lot of people in Kentucky. You get in the eastern Kentucky, there's a lot of Jehovah's Witnesses out there, and it's just really amazing that they're doing stuff like this.
And a lot of those tax dollars could go into schools instead.
Right. And right now they have this new thing called the Answers Academy. It started out as their own private school called 12 Stones Christian Academy. And now it's going to move into the former Toyota headquarters that they bought for $31 million. And my suspicion is that if we get Cameron elected as governor in the fall, that there will be a good chance that they'll try some sort of charter school bill, and people like this particular school will end up with getting tax money. So it's a really scary situation in the state right now. They have a lot of influence politically in northern Kentucky, and they have the potential for a lot more, especially if the present attorney general that's running for governor gets elected. They could have a good friend in the governor's office, because the former, not the former, but the present attorney general, this is the former Governor Matt Bevin with Ken Ham doing a selfie. But the attorney general actually got a personal tour of the Ark with Ken Ham at one point. And I did Freedom of Information Act request, and I got a few photographs, but no documentation on who paid for it or anything like that. And eventually, the Attorney General's office declined to send me any more information. And I appealed, but any appeal on the Kentucky Open Records Act statute basically goes through the Attorney General's office to judge whether it's valid or not. So I would have had to hire an attorney to go much further with my attempt to get just a handful of emails. And it really, really stank that nobody in the press or any pro bono lawyer group. There's Attorney General Cameron meeting with Ken Ham in September. He got a personal tour of the Ark, and he learned how climate change was wrong and how Noah took baby dinosaurs on the Ark. So the situation here in Kentucky is rather scary. We recently had the Next Generation Science Standards renewed. And one of my fears is that next year, if we have a new governor, that the science standards will be somehow repealed or somehow destroyed by various lawmakers that have had their sights on destroying the science standards for a long time.
All right. Well, Dan, you said before you had a few questions for Seth. So if you got anything you wanted to ask Seth, why don't you go next, seeing how you're in order on the stack here, and then we can move down to Mike.
Yeah, Seth. I guess the main thing is, what do you think that they're going to be doing in the near future? What are the Ark Encounters and the Answers in Genesis' plans?
I don't have any insider track with them anymore. Everybody that I knew who I was close to who worked there have left because of a lot of mismanagement and other factors, but mostly it was due to mismanagement and not very great working conditions. But thinking back to some of the last times that I was there, they had large displays that they put up for donors in the back areas of the Ark, like on the fourth deck where I worked, that had different ideas that they wanted to implement. Their Tower of Babel has been, I think, their biggest goal ever since building the Ark. And as far as I know, that is still in the works or likely to be done soon, or just be started soon. But they also had like expansions to the zoo they wanted to put in, giraffe enclosure. They had like kind of an amusement park ride almost that they wanted to implement. So just expanding the property, making it as enticing for people as possible. I also follow a lot of Joel Duff's content, and he was talking about kind of this recurring thing with conservative building projects where they get in people who donate millions of dollars on an annual basis as a way of like getting them to get tax breaks, and then the companies receiving the donations just have to constantly churn out new building projects in order to create a pipeline and a need for people to donate, and it benefits everybody in the pipeline.
Who do you think their donors are?
I have no idea. Not anybody that I'd ever want to meet. I'm sure the Greens are huge.
Yeah, those are the people that own Hobby Lobby and the Museum of the Bible in Washington, D.C. My research shows that they're getting a lot of money from unnamed sources, that the IRS Form 990 doesn't have to disclose who they're getting donations from. And one of the groups that gave them millions of dollars is called the Servant Foundation. They're the group that put out the Super Bowl ads for what a nice guy Jesus is.
Oh, the He Gets Us stuff?
Pardon me?
The He Gets Us program?
Yeah, the He Gets Us ads. And those are very sweet, nice, liberal Jesus, but it's putting out by a very right-wing organization that is what's called a donor-advised fund. And basically people donate huge amounts of money to them, and they in turn move the money on to people like Answers in Genesis. So you don't know who the actual donor to Answers in Genesis actually is. But in the recent years, they've been able to buy the former Toyota headquarters for $31 million. They own part of a corporate jet through something called the Answers Collective, and they're part owners, or maybe complete owners. I haven't been able to discern how much they own of the Ark. So they're getting huge amounts of money, but they're not bringing in huge amounts of people visiting the Ark to make money off of that. So the money has to be coming from these donor-advised funds and things like that. But we have no idea who these people are that are actually giving the millions upon millions of dollars. I was hoping you might have some insight into that, but
I wish I did. I can speculate a whole ton, but I don't want to say anything that would be libelous. That since I don't have any information.
May I ask a question, or I guess we want to go in order?
Sure, just go ahead, Scott. If you got one in your head there, go ahead.
Well, I'm wondering about the quote unquote zoo, the different animals they have, and especially if they're going to get a giraffe, what kind of enclosures and conditions do they have for these animals? Are they like as old as like the I know when I was growing up at the Little Rock Zoo and zoos like the ones well, there's one up in Chicago that's totally free, but at least when I was there, a lot of the places were old, and the cats and stuff were kept in just these concrete enclosures that seems like they would be maddening and cruel. What kind of standards for care of the animals are they held to, since they are a tax-free religious kind of entity? Can you comment on that, Seth?
I don't know if there's any kind of oversight body that provides them standards and regulations they have to follow. But when I was there, and this is also true of the Creation Museum, the enclosures are very improper for the animals.
Oh,
I think they give enough space probably, but there was no foliage other than a couple of the enclosures had like little grass or dirt lots, but a lot of the animals were on gravel. There wasn't a lot of tree cover. No enrichment activities for them. The animals were there on display, and that was just how it was. There was nothing, like no real consideration for the animals' well-being. As for the types of animals they kept, they expanded the zoo probably about twice as big around the time that I quit. And I've been back there 2 or 3 times since then, but I don't remember very specifically what they have. I can name a few things, but in their old enclosures, they had it was mostly herbivores. Like they had goats in kind of a petting zoo. They had ostriches and emus. They had zebras and some kind of ox, I think. And then with the expansion, they added wallabies, a few different Australian animals, of course, and I think some birds, but I don't remember what kinds.
okay.
And the newer enclosures were better designed than the old ones, so it's possible they might have brought the old ones up to standard since I was there 2 years ago.
Yeah, let's hope so.
Mm-hmm.
We lost Dan for a second, but he's back with us. Mike, you got something to ask Dan or Seth?
Yeah, Seth, I kind of a weird question, maybe, but did you ever have any personal interaction with Ken Ham? And the reason I'm asking is I had some uncles and aunts.
We can see you, Dan, but we can't hear you.
Oh,
I hear it.
okay. Uncles and aunts that were very, very conservative, and they were always bitching about the state of the universe and the youth and all of that. And they were just nasty people in general. And when you'd interact with them, there'd always be sort of a. But anyway, what kind of a person was Ken Ham? Did you ever run into him personally, or like did anything come from like you were a software engineer, right?
No, nothing that great. I worked on the point of sale equipment, so installing computers for ticketing and sales, and then maintaining databases. I did encounter Ken a few times, and the whole axiom of never meet your heroes is definitely true in this case. First time I met him was at a church where he was speaking, and I went up to introduce myself because I just started working there in guest services. And he was kind of polite, but after like a few seconds of introduction, I mean, he just kind of brushed me off. It was, I got the impression that he exudes politeness in public settings, but it is not his default mode or internal way of being.
Right.
After that, I didn't see him a whole lot around the Creation Museum. Where I started working, almost got fired once because I didn't know you weren't supposed to touch the piano in the auditorium area. Oh yeah. If he had fired, but he never found out, thankfully. Somebody else saw me and was like, hey, don't do that. There was nobody there when it happened. It was just I was down in there setting up some equipment and had a little bit of free time. But then when I started working at the Arc for point of sale, I ran into him a number of times because he would come up on the 4th deck occasionally, or he'd be out and about while I was setting up equipment. And nobody really enjoyed interacting with him. The best thing about him is that he never remembered who you were. So every time he talked to you, it was as if it was the first time meeting.
Right.
Hey, Dan,
Yeah.
Dan, can you hear us? Because we can't hear you. if you're there, just drop out and come back in.
Yeah, I think overall, I get emails from him 3 times a day. You know, his blogs that he's written. And overall, when I read his blogs, I get the impression that here's a guy like my cranky aunts and uncles who just hates the goddamn world, and every time you'd interact with him, you could feel that very intensely. And
Oh yeah,
I was just wondering, yeah. On the other hand, there are people
can you hear us, Dan? Dan, can you hear us?
No. Who's that other Aussie guy? I can never think of his name because I blocked him from my mind, but everybody knows who he is. He loves the
Ray
banana.
Comfort.
Ray Comfort.
Ray Comfort.
Now he seems like
he's actually Kiwi.
He what?
Ray Comfort is Kiwi, not Aussie.
Oh, I don't know the difference, but anyway, Kiwi. So, is that New Zealand?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, okay. Things like that are lost on me, but he seems like he's a little happier in life than Ken Ham, and that's just a general impression. I don't know. He has fun doing what he's doing.
He's a lot better at engaging with people than Ken. Ken is like, like everybody makes jokes about Mark Zuckerberg being a robot. I get the same impression from Ken. He doesn't seem to quite grasp how human interactions work, but he's really good at schmoozing when it comes to trying to impress people for donations and things like that. But as far as like anybody who is not at that level, you either don't exist or you don't want to be in his sight when you do exist. I don't know if he would ever. Well, no, actually, I do remember a time. A friend of mine was a manager of guest services at the Ark, and Ken had a parking spot that was right next to the handicap spots, so he could get in and out easily. And somebody parked a golf cart there for an emergency purpose, and he got mad at them for that. It was one of the workers because we would get around on golf carts. So yeah, just not a very pleasant guy, in my opinion. As for Ray Comfort, though. Oh, sorry. What?
Okay. That's how I judge people, not biblically, but I judge them basically on their interactions with other normal human beings. Anyway, Ray Comfort.
Yeah. So he seems very pleasant, but there have been other people who have filmed his interactions and found him using deceptive editing, where he'll cut up clips to make it seem like the conversation goes a certain way. And I've seen a few clips or videos of him on YouTube where he just kind of gets nasty with people. Not very common, I don't think, but I don't think he's as genuine of a guy as he portrays himself.
Right. Sal Cordova is famous. He is really good at that sort of stuff. But if you catch him like in between, one time he got up to answer the door and shoo away a salesman, and you could just tell the way he walked, the way he interacted with it. He slammed the door on the guy's face, and just the look on his face, it was like he had one public persona, and then it just the veil came down, and you saw this sort of like stick up his ass sort of individual who was just cranky, and it just amazes me that they can do that. They can turn on for the camera, turn on for rich people or whatever. Yeah. Anyway, that was the question.
I'm always scowling at people, and right now I have my tongue out at everybody. So that's just the way I am.
That's why you don't have your camera on. That's good.
Exactly. I was asked to keep it turned off.
Okay.
I'm only rude to telemarketers.
Well, Scott looks
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Scott looks just like Charles Darwin. That's why he doesn't like to appear on camera, because he is actually reincarnation.
On camera.
Yeah, I triggered the creation.
Oh no, I'm sorry. He's not.
Okay.
Go ahead.
I'll shut up.
Go ahead.
Never mind. I was starting to misspeak, so I stopped myself. Apologize for derailing.
Okay, reset. Dan?
Yeah, I missed a few minutes there. Had a
Yeah,
glitch.
we had a little glitch there. Seth, what were you talking? Oh, he was talking about conditions with the animals.
Oh, okay. Have you all ever determined if Ken Ham is ever going to get a giraffe? That's been one of my biggest fears, is that some poor giraffe would be stuck there at the Ark Park or something. And I was reading it's very easy to get a giraffe if you have like about anywhere from $85,000 to $100,000.
The drawings that they had on the fourth deck while I was there did have a giraffe enclosure. It looked like they wanted to try to copy the Cincinnati Zoo giraffe enclosure with a second tier where you could go up and actually interact with the animals. But I don't think it would have been as big, and I have no idea what the state of their plans are on that. That could have been scrapped for all I know.
Probably expensive. I think they take now they take fairly good care of their animals, but there was some concerns, I think, when they first opened, at least at the Ark, that some animals weren't getting the best. But now I think they're doing a fairly decent job. They have a lot of. I noticed just in the last few days they've made several mentions of interns. They built a special dorm on site for students from Christian colleges to come and live at the Ark and actually have their own dorms on the Ark property. And I think they get paid, but they probably didn't get paid much. And they're probably stuck right there on site the whole time, is my suspicion.
Before I quit, they had bought dorms, I think in Williamstown or maybe in Dry Ridge. And they had a male and a female unit, and there were a group of employees who didn't have any special qualifications, who were I think they were called the SEAL team or something, really creative name, and they were kind of multipurpose, sort of step in and be pseudo managers wherever they were called to action. And they were also tasked with being the kind of dorm parents at the offsite properties. I don't know if any of that is still going on or not, but when it was happening there, I think they charged about $500 a month in rent, and it was basically, I think it was either deducted from your paycheck or obviously it would be just recycled through when you paid.
Well, I thought it was really creepy that the people are sort of living there on site.
Mm-hmm.
And see, Williamstown is halfway, well, maybe a little closer to Cincinnati than it is to Lexington. It's about halfway. And if you're not able to leave the site, there's not much to do but stay there at the Ark property.
Mm-hmm.
Which is another problem that people just don't go into town when Ken Ham has a restaurant there and everything else. When you're done at the either attraction, most people just want to get on the highway and head back home.
Yeah. And originally, when they were getting money from the city, they said they weren't going to go into the hotel business or anything. And here they at least own part of the Hilton hotels right there next to the Ark. I've yet to be able to determine how much of the property they own. But they are at least part owners of the Hilton.
Well, that was one of the Ken Ham's promises, was that the restaurants and the hotels and everything else would come. And then the first thing he did was build a supersized restaurant.
Yeah, there was a thing in town where a guy invested all his money called Shim's Snack Shack. Ark Dogs.
That place was really good.
Yeah, and apparently they moved from when they were failing in town, they moved to the Ark property. And now, is it still in existence, or does anybody know?
When I was there, they still had it on site, and they kind of incorporated it into their other outdoor food venues. But it was just another little kind of dingy outdoor food venue. with the funnel cakes and ice cream and stuff like that. I don't know whatever happened to the guy who originally opened it, but they turned the building that he was using into off-site food preparation.
You're talking about the building in town?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Okay.
they were using it as like a extended storage for the restaurant.
And of course, they sell Uncle Leroy's fudge there too.
Well, they've actually opened a site in, I think, Dry Ridge. That's not connected to the Ark.
Yeah, there's the famous Paula Gia video when Ken Ham was making fudge for Christmas or New Year's or something. He didn't do that again.
he was packing fudge.
Yeah.
Yep, I remember that. Yeah.
He didn't do that one. That was a bad idea. All right, Mike. I think we're back around to you. You got anything else in your? You got anything else to ask Seth or Dan?
No, no questions. I'm interested in this political connection that they have, because most of his blogs are going on against climate change, right? There's climate change, there's LGBTQ, there's just all of this political environment. I guess, how does that manifest among employees, and like how much of that comes from the top down? What's the political environment of working there? I mean, are you expected to basically pay homage to these ideas that they have, all of their ultra right-wing conservative ideas? There's no such thing as man-made climate change. God is going to do it. Gay is really bad. You know, we have to one man, one woman, all of that stuff. I mean, how much of that filters down into the organization for the workers and stuff? And what would it be like for you to sit at your cubicle and have a political conversation where you expressed a liberal view, is what I'm wondering, I guess.
I wouldn't. I think anybody who's employed by Answers in Genesis is probably ideologically aligned with them. But when you get down to the attraction staff, especially at the Ark, there's a lot more diversity, because a lot more people are just there for the job, for the income. But and they'll sign whatever statement of faith they need to. And I don't think thought is quite as highly policed at the Ark site, but maybe that's changed since Ken moved his office there. But with AIG internal staff, like, I don't think you would find very much diversity of opinion. I had a coworker who was gay, and he kept it to himself as long as he could. But other than that, I'd be very surprised if there were any kind of diversity of thought. And while I was there, like, I held a lot of the same opinions as them. But now, if I were back there, I would not bring up anything to anyone who was not, like, who didn't already know me. Like, within my immediate circle of coworkers, we might talk about stuff, but definitely would not talk about it with anybody who outside of that, because anyone could snitch.
Yeah. Yeah,
if you notice, their statement of faith was up. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, the first time I ever worked down south was in Charlotte, North Carolina. I was doing a bank job for Wachovia Bank down there, and I was at a cubicle talking to this young lady.
Clarify what kind of bank job that was, Mike.
Oh, actually, I was developing.
You didn't have a ski mask or a pantyhose on your face, did you?
I was developing software. I was developing software to help rip off their customers. Like, I was actually developing an algorithm to maximize the amount of bad check charges they could come up with.
So you did have a ski mask on.
I did have a ski mask on. Right. But anyway, I said the word atheism, and she just freaked out. And she said, "Don't say that here. Don't say that." And it's like, what? I'm from Minnesota. If we want to say a word, we say it, right? But down there, you couldn't say certain words, So
Oh, here it's one of the first questions people ask you is, where do you go to church?
Yeah. What the heck? Yeah.
Go ahead, Dan. What'd you want to say?
If you notice, read their statement of faith. Several years ago, it was just, it's the standard young earth creationist stuff, as well as the anti-gay, lesbian, transgender. But now they've added stuff about critical race theory, wokeness, and other things are specifically mentioned now in their statement of faith that weren't there a few years ago. Also
Not
notice,
the woke.
yeah. Also notice the new hire of Martin Iles. He's the evangelist from Australia that was head of the Australian Christian Lobby, has been hired as their chief minister.
Right.
And
we did a stream on him day before yesterday on Martin Iles. Could you link that for me, Dave?
He's a real people. He's ultimate, and unfortunately, he is a good public speaker, and I think he will influence a lot of the fundamentalist types here in the U.S. Whereas he didn't have a very right in Australia.
Can we just collectively, as a country, ban anyone immigrating from Australia? I feel like we get the worst of them.
I know. Well, anybody that's basically
well, we did get Margot Robbie.
He gave a speech and he was basically calling for a theocracy, and he's in this country. I don't know if he's a guest or if he's a citizen now, but he was this entire speech that we covered the other day. He was preaching the theocracy, and he was talking about Babylon, and I was amazed. And he is very well spoken. His rhetoric is excellent. He's an intelligent man. He is a very dangerous person, as far as I can tell, for what he's preaching.
Yeah, my prediction.
What he's preaching is effective in that it hits all the buzzwords that Christians like to see and get energized about. But
yeah,
my face is still bruised from all the face palming I was doing with what he said, because he's just. I mean, there's no real foundational basis to anything he says, even theologically or what have you. It's just, hey, let's just paint all the people I don't like in the most negative way, and that was pretty much it.
Yeah.
I put the link in the chat, and I will put it in the description.
When Ken Ham came to Kentucky back in the 1990s, he was fast-tracked by a U.S. congressman. I can't think of his name off the top of my head. Jeff, can't remember his last name. But anyway, he was a Republican congressman here in Kentucky, and he got Ham his citizenship sort of expedited. I can't think of his name. Jeff something. Spelled Geoff. I can't remember his last name, but anyway, it didn't matter. I suspect he'll still with Miles, and Miles will probably end up going in Kentucky politics before this is all over. He's rather young; he's in his 30s, and most of the people there are somewhat older. I've always wondered if there was some sort of infighting when he was hired, because suddenly a lot of AIG employees, you didn't see them for quite some time on any of their weekly broadcasts. Like Bodie Hodge, he disappeared for a few months there. And a lot of other people you hardly ever hear from, and you wonder what in the world they're doing.
Well, here's the interesting thing. If you look at Martin... Okay, go ahead.
But I was suspecting some sort of infighting amongst themselves, inside of Answers in Genesis. But I don't really know. It's really hard to tell.
There's something interesting about Martin Iles. If you look at his biography, he was working for some sort of ultra-conservative fundraising group in Australia, and he famously raised just a record amount of money. He's very good at raising money, And I'm guessing that is why he was hired. He's not bad, but he's somebody to watch.
And do notice that his last name Isles is an anagram of lies.
Exactly.
That did not escape me.
Yep.
Yeah, there may be some hurt feelings there with Bodie and Georgia, especially because they've been there forever and they may have been skipped right over.
Yeah, I've always suspected that Bodie was his successor, but now I don't think so.
Yeah. No, this
and
guy.
Bodie comes off as such a blue collar comedy tour version of a creationist.
Right.
It's really he's a real Bubba almost, and it is just so odd sometimes how blue collar he is compared to the rest of them.
Isn't he the son-in-law or something?
Yeah. He married Ken Ham's daughter. I forgot her name, but she runs the Answers Academy school.
Right. He's a son-in-law that got a job, basically. That, and that's how he comes off. That's how I've always viewed him. Though he's writing books and all about dinosaurs and man.
And they're dragons. They're dragons, Mike.
Oh yeah, dragons. He's got a book on dragons, right? Yeah.
I'm anxious to see what happens if any of them show up. There's the National Society for Vertebrate Paleontology meeting is in October of this year in Cincinnati. And I'm anxious to see if any of them bother to even show up. They have this one young guy that I really sort of feel sorry for, that he dresses up like Alan Grant from the Jurassic Park movies, and he gives lectures on dinosaurs to kids. And what he says to them is just the total creationist dragons and flood geology bullshit that you always hear. But I feel sorry for him because I think he's a true believer. He's a very sincere and almost naive young person. And I wonder, he reviewed the Cincinnati Museum Center did a special display called Dinosaurs of Antarctica. And he reviewed the display and the IMAX film on Dinosaurs of Antarctica, and he was talking about how sad it made him, and it was just so naive, his particular review of these particular exhibits. So they have people like that I feel like they're being used by them. Well, I'm not even sure that Bodie Hodge, how sincere he is about anything, but they use these sincere people to no end.
I feel the same way. I think there are some people that get caught up in it, and I don't think a lot of the people at the top, though, actually believe it. I think they just want to sell books or sell tickets or whatever their grift is.
Yeah.
And they may be believers in the religion, but the creationist stuff sells books and tickets and DVDs and what have you.
And more and more, it's been a useful catalyst for pushing their political views as well. Because if anybody saw the documentary "Shiny Happy People" about the Duggars, there has been this underground homeschool movement since at least the 80s. That's been a concerted effort to try to install militant conservative people into the government, and we're seeing their success now, 40 years later.
There's something interesting
for 40 years I've been hearing, Dave, why are you so worried about the religious people? They don't bother anybody. I'm like, no, you don't understand. And 40 years later, I'm saying, see, I told you so. I told you so.
Yeah, people made fun of me back in the 80s for, why do you waste so much time on this? And when COVID came along, you have all the vaccine deniers, and the kooks just came out of the woodworks, especially during the former president's administration, where vaccine denial and the QAnon stuff got so popular. And it's the same type of reasoning, even if it's not always
And now it's, oh well, if it gets warmer, I'll just crank up my air conditioner and I'll play golf in January. Woohoo! And it's like,
Yeah, I have loved ones who actually went to the Ark with their children. Basically, went to the Ark Encounter on vacation with their children, and they homeschool their children. And nobody will tell me exactly what they teach them or what the curriculum is, because of course I'm the answers and atheism uncle, who they're not going to talk to me too much. But I spotted something interesting on one of the AIG broadcasts. Somebody mentioned that somebody was homeschooling their children and that they were atheists or secular, and they said, "Oh, homeschooling and they're secular." Like that never happens, right? Like for them, like there was that conference in Canada, and they were dominated by creationists, and it was for homeschooling children. And like they got to represent like 90% of the homeschooling that's going on, and that is very worrisome. Because if I had been, as a child, if I had been sequestered from all the other children, right, and homeschooled in some doctrine, I would have turned out very, very different than I did, I think.
Well, sometimes it turns you the other way, though, I think. I know I've acquired a few of the Becca textbooks. The ones in science are just god awful creationist dreck. I mean, the worst of the worst of creationist dreck. But the really disturbing one was it was a U.S. history textbook that I have. And it was all the right-wing version of U.S. history, starting with like going into Britain defeating the Spanish Armada because God wanted God didn't want the Catholics to take over North America, and that's why the Spanish Armada lost to the British. I mean, and then it goes on, and even has all these crazy things all the way up to Martin Luther King and anti-civil rights things, and it's a real bizarre book. I don't have it right next to me, but it's one of these Becca textbooks, and they're just scary, and they're one of the major things being used by homeschoolers as a Becca text.
And Ken Ham is a leader in homeschooling materials.
Oh yeah,
and you know what else I found out? Does everybody know who Kat Kerr is? The lady with the pink hair that chases hurricanes away with a stick. You know what
I thought you were talking about the latest Batman villain.
You know what her real day job is? Homeschooling materials. That's what she works in. And I was like, of course she does. Of course she does. But for everybody that's, we don't want to get too down on everybody. There is some good news, though, Dan. What is the good news as far as how many universities are still participating in Ken Ham's agreement that they will teach science his way?
I'm sure it's down, but he has like William Jennings. He only has a few schools like Bob Jones and William Jennings Bryan and Cedarville up in Ohio and a handful of other schools. So
does he have a relationship with Liberty?
Yeah.
His list has dwindled, though. He isn't very happy. More and more people are saying, no, we're going to teach biology the way it is and won't sign his because if they don't sign his paper, he won't promote them.
Yeah.
And he's like, if you don't agree with me, I'm not going to send kids to your schools. And they're saying, oh no.
Every year,
if I were a college, I would look for a legitimate marketing plan.
Well, so many of these kids are just funneled into this. Every year at the Ark, they have this college expo, and they have all these fundamentalist colleges that are on the approved list. We'll have booths there, and the students show up, and they get the tour of the Ark, and then they get to have their choice of Christian colleges. And it doesn't look too good, the choices they have. And also, the Christian Academy, the Answers Academy, that was the 12 Stones Academy that Answers in Genesis owned, is now called Answers Academy, and it's going to be moving into the Toyota building that they bought $31 million, and it's being expanded. It was originally like kindergarten to 7th or 8th grade, and now it's going to be kindergarten through senior in high school, 12th grade. So there's a chance that some of these kids will have nothing but their entire schooling. And if they go to
If
college,
anybody wants to see that building, Joel Duff did a quickie video on it where you can see the building. It's a beautiful building, and
Yeah.
as Dan said, they spent a lot of money on it. Where it's all coming from, we would really like to know, because somewhere he gets a lot of money, and we're not talking collection plate money. We're talking lots of zeros in transferring funds money. It's huge amounts of money.
Yeah, I wish there was a way to find out. I wish there was a way to find on the Form 990s who the donors actually are, and they can redact that portion of 990 forms.
So this is the AIG financial data. Cash donations 35 million, other revenue 104 million. 104 million. Where in the hell are they getting that? Total revenue 139 million. Total expenses 107 million. They have total assets $217 million. How do we start a business like this for atheism? I mean, this is incredible. Yeah, and then you were telling me at the beginning, I don't know if we were back room yet, that they are affiliated with it. They have their fingers in a number of other nonprofit organizations. That this isn't the whole story. This isn't their total net worth. There's a lot more than going on. I mean, this is incredible. Look at that. 140 million in total revenue 1 year, 2022. This bothers me deeply. So, anyway.
Yeah, Ham himself, according to the 990 forums, gets $230,000 a year salary, and he gets like another $60,000 in additional perks.
Hey,
I guarantee he's never paid for anything.
Do you know how much Martin Iles gets? Because he was talking about poor people. I'm just wondering how much he's getting.
It probably won't be available for a few years because the 990 forums are always at least 2 years old.
Right. I really want to know, because he was talking like, oh God, some people don't have enough, and he was going on, and I was looking at his suit, and I'm thinking, I bet you have enough.
Yeah, I posted something to the Panda's Thumb recently, within the last couple of months, called "Fun with 990 Forms," and it has a bunch of the information I found by going through the last few 990 forms from Answers in Genesis and some of the things they owned. And he has he has several other relatives on the payroll. Bodie Hodge, his daughter, Renee is Bodie's wife. She was Ken Ham's daughter. She is Ken Ham's daughter. And then there's at least another son-in-law and a few other people on the payroll that are all members of the Ham immediate family. But if you go to that, I have a lot of information I found out about just going through the 990 forums, how much they earn, and some of the other things about the corporate jet. And how it's interesting how they fund the organization called Answers Collective that owns the corporate jet. Answers Collective is apparently funded by the parking lot outside of the Ark. You have to pay about $10 to park there. And that money goes to the organization called Answers Collective. Answers and Collective, in turn, funds their part ownership of a corporate jet. And as disturbing as it is, I find that brilliant way of doing business. You just get one thing to pay for another. It was just brilliant. I mean, they might be they awful at science, but they're brilliant at some of these other things. They really know how to rake in the money. Yeah, there's
Oh,
my
I've
article.
I've I've said for a long time, yeah, Ken can rake in the money.
Well, and back a few years ago, when they originally opened, they had a contract with a company called Parking Box, and if I remember correctly, they broke that contract in order to install their own machines.
Why don't I have
Very-
a wrench, Dave?
What?
I don't have a wrench. I
You don't have a wrench.
I don't have a wrench
Oh.
on your channel. Otherwise,
Where
I
you,
would
where
post
you
this
at?
one.
Are you? Well, pop something in the chat there. Oh wait, there you are. There you are. Hold on. I got you. I got you.
Okay.
I got you.
I mean, I'm the guy with the links, dude. I should have a wrench.
There you go. You can clobber people now.
Let's see if I. Yeah, there we go. I got it. Okay.
We'll get
I just give you a link to this. So, it's your, this is wonderful, Dan. Thank you. I'm gonna read this one.
well. Scott's got a wrench too.
You know, they probably submitted a new one this year, but it won't be available till at least next year sometime.
Yeah. Cool.
I feel so authoritative and special.
Oh my goodness. Okay.
Well, Seth, you've been grilled a lot. Before we wrap things up, because it's been about an hour, and I didn't want to hold everybody up all afternoon. You got any questions for Dan or Mike, or anything you'd like to say about Ken Ham, because you worked there? So, what are your feelings on the discussion today?
I'm just really glad there are people who are still keeping tabs on all of this. When I quit there, I didn't leave on bad terms with the company, but I had a lot of like personal frustrations with them, and ended up just not having any ties to there over the long term, the last few years. And so I'm really glad there are people who are still actively tracking what's going on there. I mean, around my local area, a lot of people still are unaware that the Ark is even in existence, or they've heard about it and they're like, oh yeah, I kind of want to go sometime, but they've never been. But it is like Answers in Genesis and their attractions are really insidious for how they operate. And the attractions are just a front for all of the much more shady, deplorable stuff that's going on in the back end for their interactions with schools and with politics. And so I'm just thankful that there are people like you guys who are trying to keep tabs on it and make sure that somebody's holding them accountable. So because otherwise they're going to blindside people when if they ever achieve whatever kind of goals they have.
Aren't there some kind of laws about nonprofit organizations and politics? I thought there were. I don't know much about it.
There, you know, if you are a nonprofit, you're not supposed to promote any legislation or any political view. But the thing is, I think it was January, they had a special revival at the Ark Encounter. It might have been at the Creation Museum. About abortion legislation here in Kentucky.
Right.
And no matter how you feel about abortion, Answers in Genesis is still a nonprofit, and they weren't supposed to endorse any particular legislation. And I've reported on that on the Panda's Thumb as well. It's probably in January or so. But Answers in Genesis got involved with having a revival meeting specifically for this anti-abortion legislation in Kentucky, and they brought on the politician that was going to sponsor the bill, and she gave a talk, and they had this guy from Arizona named Jeffries, I think was his last name, an extreme right-wing preacher, and anyway, I think they violated, here it is, Ken Ham using Kentucky politics. And it was really amazing that if you look at the details on what nonprofits are supposed to do, they failed. But at the same time, the IRS just doesn't enforce any of this anymore. There's plenty of preachers out there that basically will endorse candidates on the pulpit. And that's happening all the time here in Kentucky.
Yeah, the Republicans have withheld a lot of money to the IRS staff, so they've just like stacked it against them in terms of being able to reinforce it. And also, there's that whole idea leaking around called the sincerely held religious beliefs, to where a judge probably would not be too sympathetic to them on appeal if they even won a conviction against them.
Okay, you can make me small again. So, Dan, how many articles have you written for Panda's Thumb?
Quite a few. I don't know. I've been doing it for years.
Okay, thank you. I'm gonna. This is a rich thing for me to mine.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I would love to get together with a few people like Matt Young from the Panda's Thumb and put this all together in a book, but I'm not sure who would buy it. I mean, we could weave this all into different chapters in a book or something and have a fun expose of Answers in Genesis.
I'll make sure I put a link in the description when we're done here.
Yeah.
Yeah, we all appreciate all the work you do, Dan. And Mike, I know sometimes Mike has days where he's like, why do I even make these videos? But Seth, I think would agree with me that we appreciate you making your videos, Mike. And I'm sure there's some people out there that appreciated, hearing a friendly voice and that science is okay and you'll be okay. It's not the boogeyman that it is. So
science is just all right with me.
And Scott too, Scott's always there helping you out too, and we appreciate all the work Scott does helping you out too. And Scott,
I take heart
Scott,
in knowing that.
Go ahead, Mike. Go ahead.
I take heart in knowing that there are 6 or 7 people listening to me. It's wonderful.
One of them's me. I'm always there.
Okay. Yeah, 6 or 7.
Mike does a great show, and Mike's channel is linked in the description. If for some reason you are not subscribed to Mike's channel already, you can remedy that very quickly. Subscribe to Mike, and he, like I say, if you appreciate attacking the pseudoscience community, we appreciate everybody that does, including Mike and Dan. And Scott, you got anything else on your mind before we say goodbye for the day?
Well, it's too damn hot. That's what I wanted to tell you. Actually, today's a lot cooler. We're only 91 degrees at the moment. Usually it's over 102 by now.
Now Scott's in Texas, so he's been experiencing climate change firsthand.
We've had some nice weather here in Kentucky the last couple of days, but you can smell the smoke and it still burns your eyes from Canada.
My goodness.
It's going to heat up this coming week and be miserable, unfortunately.
I was in northern Minnesota last week and it was 39 degrees one night.
Mike was just on vacation, refreshing himself.
Yep.
Mike, anything else to say before we go?
Nothing. I got nothing. Thank you.
Got it out.
Thank you, Dave.
I appreciate everybody. Anything else on somebody's? Dan, you anything else on your mind you want to let
Not
folks
really.
know that Ken Ham's up to?
I hope we can talk just a minute after this is over, but other than that, I really can't think of anything off the top of my head that we haven't already mentioned. I know I was banned from a lot of Ken Ham's social media, even though I never posted anything to. I never replied to anything, disliked or liked anything on his social media. But apparently somebody went through and found my name, and I'm blocked from Twitter and all the Facebook pages. But I found ways around it. I mean,
we need to print up some T-shirts. I was banned by Ken Ham.
He wasn't just banned; he was pre-banned.
I was
Pre-banned,
pre-banned from pages I wasn't even on. I went to go click on some of his other ones, and I couldn't see those either. So
Yeah, so
they got my IP number or something.
Well, he has all these thousands upon thousands of followers, so they had to have somebody go through the entire list and check everybody out because I never commented.
Now, I wonder if I'm banned. That'd be nice.
There's ways around it, so I find his tweets every day and his Facebook page stuff every day.
One thing I've noticed. Yeah.
Pardon me?
Oh, just create a new account that just follows him and doesn't engage.
Yeah.
One thing I have noticed, though, is he always had all the comments shut off on the YouTube videos, but lately they have the comments open on them. I don't know, if somebody said, hey, you are hurting yourself with the algorithms or something or what, but they've opened up the comments section on a lot of the videos now. So
maybe that was a Martin Lies contribution.
Maybe they want the conflict, the other, the back and forth that Ken Ham had a social media policy against. He didn't want anybody to say anything in the comments that it made any kind of a discussion whatsoever.
Yeah,
if you just didn't say hello or amen or whatever, it probably got deleted.
I watch their Answers News every Monday. And it's interesting that it used to be all these misrepresentations of science stories, and they still do that. They basically go through and find popular accounts of new science discoveries and don't look at the original scientific research. They look at some pop newspaper article about it. But here lately, well, for the last 6 months or more, they've become more and more obsessed with transsexuals and gay people and stuff like that. And about 80% of the videos will be on that and abortion, whereas only a tiny percentage is on their misrepresentation of science stories. Which
and for everybody that may have missed it, and I don't know why you did, Doc Dino was on with me yesterday, and we were chit chatting day before yesterday. Day before yesterday. Excuse me. Day before yesterday, Doc Dino was on with me, and we reviewed one of Ken Ham's classic videos. And I had a little mix-up at the beginning with his 10 years ago and his presentations he's doing now, and they haven't changed hardly at all. He has his shtick down pat, and he repeats it very well, and he delivers it very well. And part of his, call it charm or charisma, does get across, and it sticks in young minds.
Were you there?
That was in there too.
Were you there? Yeah.
That was in there too. Where billions of dead things laid down by water and rock layers all over the earth, and his little platypus thing that I can't even say. It's such a tongue twister, but he's got those little limericks down, whatever, and those little catchphrases. Were you there? Were you there? And the problem is not, and what we were trying to address in the video on Thursday was, it's not so much that he's preaching, because in this country, like it or not, you have the right to do religion as you please. But he crosses the line, and he just downright defames people by calling all the scientists and the politicians and everybody else he doesn't like liars. So go check it out. And Mike, what's coming up with you? Anything coming up on your channel here? You going to be covering anything else interesting?
More Ken Ham stuff, I guess. And I'm becoming increasingly concerned with this political bullshit and how they're losing their shit over pride and and all of that. I'm hoping to get back into some biology and science shortly, but we'll see what happens this summer. I'm kind of busy. So.
And again, Mike's description is in the, or Mike's channel is in the description. If you're not subscribed, make sure you remedy that. And I'd like to thank Mike and Scott for joining us today. And Dan, it's always a pleasure to talk to you. Keep up the fight. And I know you don't hear it enough, but we all appreciate you. And
Definitely.
And keep it up for us because we root you on every time we see an article. And Seth, always good to talk to you too. And I'm sorry that you worked for Ken Ham, but I'm overjoyed that you no longer work for Ken Ham. And just so Ken Ham knows, if he's listening, I've got a rainbow in the background because you don't own the rainbow, Ken Ham. Everybody does. So take that, okay? And for everybody in the chat, I appreciate everybody stopping by. We had Carol and we had Gurr. We had a close personal friend of mine, Renee. We had Bree. We had Nerdy.
Yeah.
We had so many folks stopping by, and Chris stopped by and saying hi. Colossia, AR, Doc Dino, and Doc Dino too. If you aren't subscribed to Doc Dino, remedy that and go subscribe to Doc Dino. That's Dr. Deino, Dino. And yes, it is a play on Kent Hovind. So if you appreciate that, make sure you check him out. Trusty Ape was here. Atheist Mo, Pragmatic Crystal. Let's see. I think that's everybody. If I missed anybody, thank you for joining us. And if you like videos like these, make sure you're hitting my like and my subscribe and leave a comment. If you've got a question for Dan or Seth or Mike, drop it in the comments. If they don't see it, I'll pass it along to them. We'll try and get you an answer, okay? Gentlemen, thank you for joining us. I hope you all have a great afternoon, and we'll see you next time.